So now we're going to focus on linear functions. Linear functions have a constant growth rate. That's slope. Graph is always a straight line. Right? So the formula for a linear function, if we're just talking about it in words, and it's a linear growth function, would be the growth rate times x plus whatever my initial value. My initial value would be at times 0. That's what my initial value is. All right. So slope is the growth rate. That's how much we add every year, every whatever value we're talking about. The y-intercept is the initial value. At 0, at time 0, this is what we started with. Slope is the change in my function. That's still the change in y. The function values just happen to be the y values, right? The function values are the y values. Over the change in the independent. The independents are inputs. Right, whether it's x or t. A lot of times ours is going to be t, time. So they're either the change in time, the change in whatever x value represents the independent. So it's still the exact same thing that we talked about before. It's the change in y, the change in my function, divided by the change in x, the change in my input values. If slope comes out positive, it's an increase. All right, the bigger the pie means my line is moving up. If slope is negative, it's a decrease. It means my line is moving down, and slope can come out 0. This is a constant or horizontal line. It means it's flat, neither increasing nor decreasing, right? Slope is 0. Right? So we've got increase, positive, and the bigger the increase, the steeper the line. So the higher the number, the steeper that gets. The lower the number, the less steep it gets. Same thing with the negative. The bigger the negative number, the more steep it goes down. The smaller the negative, the less steep it gets. Alright, so we're going to do an example. Alright, so a simple linear case. Suppose that we know that the cost to rent a banquet hall is given by the linear function c equals 2x plus 300, where x is the number of people who are going to attend, and c is the cost in dollars. What's the initial value? So remember, the initial value is the y-intercept. That's the b part. When x is 0, b is 300. So it means if they rent the hall and nobody's going to be in the attendance, they're just going to rent an empty hall, it'll cost them initially a fixed cost, that's also known usually as my fixed cost, of 300. Whether one person comes or 1,000 people come, they have to tack on this $300 every time. Right? That $300 is added on no matter how many people attend. Whether it's 0 people or 100 people, you have to add that $300. Slope is the next thing we're going to look at. So what slope and interpretance meaning with respect to this problem. All right, so slope in this case is 2. Remember, it's the change in y, which in this case is my cost, over the change in x, which is number of people, right? And so you kind of use your units to help you out with the interpretation. So the slope is 2, which means cost, it's positive to start off with, is increasing, and it should make sense, cost is almost always increasing, by, well, cost is in dollars, by $2 per additional person, right? Every time they add a person to the attendance, it costs them $2, right? For one person, it costs them $2. For 2 people, it costs them $4. For 3 people, it would cost them $6, right? So for every additional person, it's going to cost them $2. It's fixed. It's the same price for every person. All right, now we're going to use it. So if 350 people attended, right? Remember those $2 for each of them, but there's also that initial cost of $300. So remember the cost equation is 2x plus 300. And so my x value is 350. We want to find my cost value, so you plug that in. Cost equals 2 times 350 plus 300. And so it costs them $1,000 to rent the hall for 350 people. All right, the last part of this example. If the cost of the banquet was, so suppose we know the final answer. We know it cost somebody $1,500 to rent the banquet hall. If that was the case, how many people were in attendance? So this time we were given cost. We want to find the x value. We're going to use the same equation. Cost is still 2x plus 300, but this time we're plugging in the c part. So 1,500 goes in for cost. 2 times x, we don't know x, so we leave x, plus 300. And so we're going to solve for x. So this requires a bit of algebra. So the first thing you do is you move the 300 by subtracting it to the other side. And so this comes out 1,200 equals 2x. Get rid of the times 2 by dividing by the 2. And so we get 600 equals x. So this means 600 people attended. Right? If it cost them $1,500, that means 600 people came, right? Because it's 2 times each person plus an additional $300. And if you add it up, that's what you get, right? If you take 2 times 600, that gives you 1,200. Add the 300 for the initial cost, that gets you to your $1,500. All right, stop there. I'm going to pick up the next examples in the next videos.